This is the Blood Red podcast from the Liverpool Echo, giving you the inside track on all the big talking points from Anfield.
Hello and welcome to this week's Liverpool.com podcast. I'm Matt Addison. Michael Plant is with me, and for once it seems we actually have some Liverpool wins to talk about. Some positive talking points for once. We're not trying to fix Liverpool. We're trying to work out whether or not Liverpool can sustain this across the next few weeks and really try and catch up with Arsenal in the Premier League title race. Before we get stuck into it, though, to get the best discount off your NordVPN plan, don't forget you can go to nordvpn.com/bloodred. That link gives you 4 extra months on top of a 2-year plan, and there's no risk with Nord's 30-day money-back guarantee. The link with all of that information is in the podcast episode description box below. Without further ado, though, let's get stuck into not just the Real Madrid game, the Aston Villa game as well, Michael. A couple of games back-to-back where Liverpool have looked a lot better than what they have done in recent weeks. Defensively very solid, creating chances and scoring goals, maybe not freely, but certainly enough to get themselves over the line. And for once, they've managed not to go behind in the first 10 or 15 minutes, which is a big change and a big help as well, I'm sure. So how have you assessed the last couple of games for Liverpool? Was it a surprise that they played as well as they did against Villa and then Real Madrid? What's been your analysis of the last couple of games that we've seen?
Yeah, well, I mean, one of the last times I was on, I was speaking about the fact that there are so many issues for Liverpool to solve. It's difficult to know where to begin almost. And almost in the space of 2 performances, Slot seems to have, at least in the short term, I find it quite an answer to quite a few of those. So, I mean, obviously defending set pieces is a huge plus that they've been much better at the last couple of games. I think that just in general, the defensive cohesion has been much better. I think the midfield balance has looked a lot better in terms of the timing of runs and attacks. I think that there's no surprise really that the fact that Andy Robertson coming in has improved the team. That referring to that midfield 3 that played so well last season has obviously been an impact across those 2 games. I think Mohamed Salah has certainly against Villa, that was probably his best performance of the season. And against Real Madrid was certainly an improvement on what's been recently. And they've created plenty of chances in both those games as well. So look, there's a handful of reasons why. And I think that obviously the individual performances feed into the collective team performance. But I think the massive caveat that we've got to say, and not to be too much of a downer, is they have played 2 teams that have opened up against Liverpool that have come to play at Anfield. And that probably does suit Liverpool at the moment and the way they're playing. I think the big test really is, as you kind of said before we started recording to me, that how are they going to fare against the teams that sit deep and make it difficult, that get lots of long throws into the box and play lots of long balls downfield. So there's certainly signs of optimism, but, I don't at this stage want to get too excited from a Liverpool perspective. And there's certainly a lot more challenges still to face, I would say.
Yeah, we spoke on last week's podcast a little bit about whether the Champions League might be a better route to success for Liverpool than the Premier League this season. And obviously, it's easy now to say, oh, yes, that's definitely going to be the case. And you can never be sure with those competitions. A lot of it is look at the draw. A lot of it is teams that you face. But as you say there, it does feel like Liverpool are better set up or better suited to play against those teams. We're going to talk about a few individuals, but Florian Wirtz feels like an obvious one to start with. When you're getting him to compete for long throws and help out defensively from corners where you've got players towering over him, of course, you're not going to see the reason that Liverpool spent more than £100 million on him. Obviously, if you put him in a Real Madrid game where it's all about technique and it's about having that quality, it's not necessarily about physically bullying the other players or being bundled off the ball at certain times. Of course, you're going to see a completely different version of him. He's not the only one, but he was the one really to me that stood out against Real Madrid that you just thought, yeah, that's why Liverpool have bought him.
Yeah, and I think in general his performance has been better in the Champions League this season. He was good against Atletico. He was good against Frankfurt. I thought he was brilliant against Frankfurt. And there just seems to have been a little bit of boost of confidence. I think that he's not obviously a winger, but I think perhaps one of those roles where he starts out wide and can float around the pitch and can pick up wherever he wants certainly suits him more than, I don't know, maybe it even does at this stage suit him more than being a number 10 who all the focus and all the attention falls on him. And obviously him and Szoboszlai are almost sharing that creative responsibility last night. it came more from Wirtz in terms of chances created, and Szoboszlai obviously had many more shots than Wirtz. But yeah, listen, he's looking better. He definitely needs to improve his numbers. I think that for all the talk of improved performances, he needs to get goals and assists on the board, and particularly when you paid 100+ million for him. But look, there's my general thought about Liverpool at the moment is there's encouraging signs, but let's not get too ahead of ourselves, because it was only 10 days ago that they were bullied and overwhelmed against Brentford. And let's just, baby steps almost a little bit, and let's just see where they are in terms of the title race. But actually, just one last thing, and to bring back to your original point, you spoke about the Champions League, whether they're in a good position in the Champions League. Well, suddenly now they picked up 9 points from 12 games. That's a very healthy position to be in this group stage, and you suspect it probably will go down to game 8. I mean, Liverpool, one of the few teams that it didn't last season. They were very much the anomaly. But I suspect that 3 wins from the final 4 should be enough. And actually, looking at those fixtures, they probably should get that. So, certainly an encouraging position after 3 matches in the league phase.
Yeah, it just takes the pressure off, doesn't it, a little bit, when you think of, they got into Milan away, which is not going to be an easy game in a few weeks' time. So that just makes that look a little bit easier. But you mentioned there about, Liverpool needing to sort of back this up against other teams moving forwards. I think there's not really any doubt that one of the biggest improvers and even just one of the best performers in the last couple of games has been Alexis Mac Allister in that midfield. That feels like the key, really, to me. We saw a huge change against Villa, even against Real Madrid. I thought Liverpool's midfield was the reason that they won that game, really, and managed to dominate physically as much as anything else in that sense. Szoboszlai, Mac Allister, Gravenberch, not a surprise, of course. Liverpool won the Premier League with that midfield 3 last season, but that feels massive, really. If Florian Wirtz has to go on the left to accommodate that, I think that's probably the winning formula, really, to move forward with it. It was just so impressive, wasn't it, in the last couple of games? And hopefully this is the start of Alexis Mac Allister's season now.
Yeah, I agree exactly with what you said. They won the match in midfield against Real Madrid. I actually think it was the same against Villa. I do think Villa played into their hands a little bit more, but absolutely. And I think that Gravenberch and Mac Allister bring the best. Well, actually, on Szoboszlai, but particularly Gravenberch and Mac Allister, more kind of deeper positions, they bring the best out of each other. And what I do think has been a massive thing, particularly against Real Madrid, but also against Villa, is that when Gravenberch goes, Mac Allister sat. And I even noticed there was one instance against Madrid where Gravenberch got the ball and Bradley was on the right, and he didn't just ball him forward. He had a look up, he had a look to see, is it the right time to go? And then he kind of tentatively went. He didn't just ball him recklessly without looking. And I think that's a huge factor in the improved performances in the last 2 games. And I've been critical sometimes at just how gung-ho it's been, but it's been a little bit more conservative. They've looked more solid at the back, and it's just if they can apply this now through repeated games, it'll look much better. But Mac Allister's been great. And listen, he's such a fantastic footballer. To see him back at his best is good. And Liverpool fans will be delighted that is the case.
Yeah, when Liverpool were going through that run of games where they kept losing, and obviously Frankfurt was the outlier, you kind of looked at it and thought, well, Mac Allister's not playing well. There's different elements of this team that are just not playing well, and you couldn't really see where it was going to come from. But I can't quite explain what's changed for Alexis Mac Allister. I don't know what happened before that Villa game on Saturday, but he just looks like a completely different player now. He looks refreshed. He looks able to sort of move about the pitch and get, across the ground a lot quicker. Maybe it is just the case that, his fitness, his match sharpness needed to get to a certain point, and maybe he's one of those players that suddenly things, do click into place for him. But I think you are right as well to say that connection between Mac Allister and Gravenberch is important. And Dominic Szoboszlai, again, it's become the norm this season. It wasn't, again, a surprise that he played as well as he did. He was unlucky, really. I actually thought on first viewing when Courtois makes the save in the first half, I thought maybe Szoboszlai should have done a little bit better, but maybe that was being a little bit harsh when Wirtz sets him through. But again, another performance from him, really, that just shows how important he's become. A lot of people in the summer were talking about, well, Florian Wirtz has been signed to replace Dominic Szoboszlai. I'm not sure, maybe Virgil van Dijk aside, whether there's a player whose place in that team is more secure than Dominic Szoboszlai. He just simply has to be there, and we've seen the experiments of right back, and he's played in a couple of different midfield positions, but wherever it is on the pitch, he just has to be there at the moment. Is his form as instrumental as anything else, do you think, to this Liverpool upturn as well? Because I know he was playing well before, but he just seems to get the best out of so many people around him.
Yeah, agreed. And I think he's been Liverpool's player of the season. I think most observers would say that, and he's been the one player that when things weren't going well was still scrapping, was still not the players weren't putting in 100% effort, but he was really the one that was just bringing that fight and that battle that was sometimes lacking. And yeah, I mean, I was one of those people that coming into the season questioned where he was going to fit into the team, because Gravenberch and McAllister were so imperative last season to Liverpool's form. Just looking, you naturally thought that Wirtz would come in that number 10 role, and where is a place for Szoboszlai? But I think whatever happens, bar a little bit of rotation here and there, I think Arne Slot will always find a place for Dominik Szoboszlai. I mean, he's even played kind of a wide attacking role at times in the past. I certainly remember at the end of last season playing there once or twice. Right back, I still think it's a real role for him actually at right back, but I don't think in against better opposition. I think Nottingham Forest in a few weeks, Leeds in a few weeks are really good. That Liverpool know they're going to dominate possession. They can probably afford to have one fullback bombing on a little bit more. And yeah, that'd be an interesting evolution perhaps over the next couple of weeks. But he's been absolutely outstanding, and the amount of ground he covers is just unbelievable. And he does all the things you want from a midfielder. He tackles, he produces attacking moments, he scores goals, and he helps keep possession. He just does everything. And this season, he's been absolutely fantastic. You chuck in the work rate as well, and he's been, in my eyes, by far Liverpool's best player this season.
Yeah, no doubt about it. And that kind of leads us nicely. You mentioned the fullback positions there. We've got to talk about Conor Bradley and Andy Robertson as well. Let's go for Bradley first. I thought he was the outstanding player, Liverpool's man of the match in my eyes against Real Madrid. And again, a little bit like Alexis McAllister, has struggled this season, hasn't maybe been fit or looked fit when he's played, hasn't maybe been able to put together a string of 90 minutes, one after the other, but somehow out of nowhere completely shuts down Vinicius Jr. in that particular game. And just a spotless performance, really. I gave him a 9 in our player ratings, but I mean, you went a million miles away from giving him a 10 there.
Yeah, I mean, he'd made that early foul on Vinicius Jr., and I mean, I think to get a 10, you almost have to make 0 mistakes in a game, and he just made that one early mistake. But again, in Bradley's defense, he learned from that. He realized that he jumped in that one tackle, and after that, he stood off a little bit. He actually let Vinicius have the ball and let him play his passes sometimes, which is actually the clever thing to do. There's many aspects that impressed me about that performance from Conor Bradley, but one big one was he just wound Vinicius up. He just got under his skin. He maybe left the foot in a little bit. He made sure he barged into him. And Vinicius, I think he lost his head personally a little bit. And even giving away the foul, dragging him to the ground and himself receiving a booking, probably needlessly. And certainly could have been a bit more, didn't have to be as obvious with it. And Bradley was fantastic. And look, people listening to this probably will guess from my accent, there's a half little reason why I want to see him do so well. But I just think, it was obviously against Madrid, the narrative was all set against Trent Alexander-Arnold. And obviously when you consider what happened last season in this fixture as well with Bradley and how impressive he was in that game. But it really felt like a night actually where he stamped his authority and said, no, I can be Liverpool's first choice right back. And I ahead of the season, well, kind of at the start of the season, did a huge feature on Bradley talking about how this is his opportunity, that he's been waiting his whole life almost to establish himself as Liverpool's first choice right back. And now this is a possibility because Trent Alexander-Arnold's gone. And then I wrote that and it didn't feel like it just felt like nothing happened. He didn't really play well. Frimpong played a little bit, Szoboszlai played a little bit, but now it really feels like he in my eyes, has grasped this opportunity and in my eyes should be going forward, have a real claim to be Liverpool's first choice right back. Obviously, Frimpong is a factor in that. I do think there is still a role for Szoboszlai, as I say, but yeah, look, I was delighted to see him play so well, and I think a 9 out of 10 was absolutely the correct score for him on the night. He was brilliant.
It's just that sort of ability to keep running and keep going, and that aggression, I think, is hugely important. We saw a lot of times, people have been critical this season of Liverpool being almost a little bit meek at times, and maybe there is, a certain element of physicality that they lack. Like we spoke with Florian Wirtz, he's never going to go up against Dan Burn and win a header. That's just not going to happen. With Conor Bradley, though, he's not the biggest. He's not, physically at his peak yet, but just that ability to drive forward, whether that's with the ball, whether that's, trying to win the ball back. That's what Liverpool have shown in these last couple of games all the way across the pitch. And that's the kind of almost an intangible, really, isn't it? That you need that. Maybe that comes from confidence. Maybe that is something that when you are on a bit of a downturn, you need to dial that up a little bit more and, try even harder to go down that route. But yeah, as you say, he completely frustrated Vinicius, not just him as well, a couple of other players. Obviously, the iconic image last season of him clattering into Kylian Mbappe. It was a real repeat of that, I would say, in terms of how impressive he was and how complete that performance was as well. I think for both him and Andy Robertson, the question is, can you do that 3 times in the space of 9 days? Can they ask them to go again and do that against Manchester City? But I mean, if they are physically ready, and obviously it's a Tuesday, Sunday turnaround, so there's slightly more time than possibly there could have been in these sort of difficult run of games. I mean, we've spoken about Bradley, but Andy Robertson as well on the other side was maybe not quite as impressive, or maybe didn't do quite as much in terms of going forward and showing that intent. But again, just a solid base. It's no coincidence that Liverpool have conceded 0 goals in those 2 games, and those 2 have been there and played well.
The thing is, what stood out with Kirk is when he's played a left back is he's made erratic decisions. He's made at times senseless actions, and you can see the frustration in Virgil van Dijk. When Robertson's there, it's just not there. He makes sensible decisions that almost don't stand out, that we don't pick up on them because they're just not as obvious. But he does very often just does the right thing. And it's a really simplistic way of looking at it, but he does. And Van Dijk has looked better with Robertson at left back in the last 2 games. And fair play to Robertson, because he faced a lot of criticism last season, probably from us included at times, but that would have been a real blow over the summer to have a rival come in and usurp you. And particularly, it's pretty obvious for a couple of weeks there that Slot was intent on not playing him, but he's kept going, worked hard, put the performances in when he's been given the opportunity, and he's reversed this now. And look, I think at the moment, if anyone was picking the strongest Liverpool 11, he would be in it, Andy Robertson. And yeah, he wasn't quite as impressive as Bradley. I thought he was good against Villa, Robertson. And I know this is slightly going back a few weeks, but I thought he was really good against Frankfurt a couple of weeks ago. God, these matches just start blurring into each other a little bit. But I just take you back just to one thing you said, though. You were talking about fitness and rotating and Slot. It's been a bit of a change at times this season, but there was 2 points. One, it's interesting that almost at the crucial juncture of the season, he's stuck with a team more or less. He made one change in the week, he made one change in midweek, and he's stuck with more or less that same 11. I think he'll do the same against City. It's interesting that last season so much of his success came from not rotating. So it's just, I don't really know what point I'm making, I suppose, but just that he went back to that formula once again. And the interesting thing is, he talked a lot about fitness. Bradley and McAllister are 2 players in particular. But just, again, at the vital moment of the season, he's got both of those players back up to a certain level of fitness that they can play a couple of matches in a row. McAllister's actually started 3 in a row because he played against Palace as well, didn't he? So, yeah, the squad just looks now, even 10 days on from Brentford, just looks much better and much healthier.
Yeah, with Robertson, it is just that calmness, isn't it? Virgil van Dijk is fully capable of doing 2 people's jobs, but if the team isn't playing well and it is a little bit relentless, then maybe you just need somebody in there who can help him out. I wonder as well if Arne Slot had his time again from the summer to now, I wonder if we maybe would see a little bit more of Andy Robertson. I know people have made the comparison from when Alberto Moreno was in the team and Robertson eventually kind of slowly worked his way in. That's an obvious comparison to make, but I'm fully convinced that Milos Kerkez is hugely talented. I think he's younger than Conor Bradley. He's still a very, very young player, very inexperienced, and has come to a much bigger club than Bournemouth for a lot of money. So I'm not by any stretch writing him off. But do you think it would be fair to say that maybe Arne Slot should have been a little bit more gradual with that process at left back?
Yeah, I think so. And I don't think that's being wise after the event. I think that was probably said on this podcast for a couple of weeks. I couldn't understand what the rationale was behind that personally. But look, I understand as well that he felt that for this team and for the way he wants to play, that Kirk is important. But yeah, listen, and Slot has made mistakes this season, and I think we've spoken about it in this podcast, and I do think that was one. But I think where Kirk could benefit actually coming up is this run of games that they've got in and around over Christmas and into kind of start of January. Slightly nicer opponents to play against in terms of certainly games that you expect Liverpool will dominate possession and get on the ball. And I think that's more suited to Kirk is to let him bomb on in possession. I don't think he's as strong defensively as Andy Robertson. And before the season, I actually thought it'd be the case that Robertson would come in against the tougher opponents and that Kirk would play against slightly weaker opposition. But I do think that Forest, for instance, Liverpool will dominate the ball. I think that could be potentially a game for him to play. Leeds, who else to play over this run coming up?
West Ham at some point, isn't it?
Yeah, West Ham Wolves play, don't know, for Christmas. So yeah, I think we could see a little bit more from Kirk in the weeks to come. But look, hugely talented player, as you said, and anyone who saw him last season, I was at Bournemouth Man City actually about this time last year, and he was outstanding. He was just unbelievable. He had Man City on toast, and I think he played a role in both goals. But so I think there's plenty to come for him still.
Yeah, I'd be surprised if that was at the weekend, fitness permitting. I think Andy Robertson will be in there. But yeah, beyond that, I definitely still would back Arne Slot to get a lot more out of him. And I mean, just quickly on him as well, I think you mentioned there what he did for Bournemouth last season. I don't think we've really seen that role from him at Liverpool so far. He's not necessarily given that license to do those same things. So it's not just adjusting to a new team. It's also adjusting to the players around you, the role and the specifics of the tactics that Arne Slot is trying to play. And even the manager himself is trying to work out whether that's the right balance, whether that's the right thing for, the new players that he's got around him. It was always likely to take a little bit of time, but we've kind of pulled on that. Exactly. Yeah, exactly. There's plenty of time for him. 10 games in, I don't think anybody should be writing him off. But we've hinted a few times at the Manchester City game at the weekend, obviously a huge one for Liverpool. Let's talk a little bit about that now, because obviously they're a team, most seasons you'd expect them to be in the Premier League title race as well. I know you've obviously spent a lot of time covering them in the past when they've probably been better than what they are now, if we're being honest. But how do you sort of assess the start of the season under Pep Guardiola? Because it's a slightly different Manchester City and a slightly less typically Guardiola Manchester City than people might have expected if they haven't watched a lot of them this season.
Maybe they will play defensive at the weekend. They'll do long balls like they did against Arsenal, get everyone behind possession. Yeah, they are certainly a different Man City than, let's say, particularly the Man City that won 4 titles in a row. They've really evolved from that City, certainly in terms of playing style and in terms of personnel. They are, as this was an issue, when they were winning those titles, they are very reliant on Erling Haaland. It's become a real talking point in and around City. But at the moment, that doesn't matter because he's just been so good. His goal scoring record is just outstanding. I saw a clip from his press conference ahead of the Dortmund game, and he was asking you break your scoring record, and he just responded, "Which one?" which I thought was a great response. It'd be an interesting game. Look, I mean, Man City I think they will come out and play. I know there is that Arsenal game where they sat deep in possession. I think they'll come out and play, particularly the Etihad. They're very good, and Liverpool have struggled there over the years. I think it'll be certainly a very, very testing game, but it feels a lot less daunting now, I think, from a Liverpool perspective than it did maybe a week ago, 10 days ago. So, I'm looking forward to it. I think it should be a really good game, but I think that, Konate and Van Dijk will have a huge role to play, and if they can keep Erling Haaland quiet, which they have done in the past, it will certainly make the job of stopping Man City that little bit easier, you would say.
In terms of the threats then, aside from Erling Haaland, what else do you think Liverpool have to look out for? I think Omar Marmoush is back now, isn't he, from injury? I'm a big fan of him. Ryan Cherky, we've not really seen the best of him, but he started to play a little bit more, and Phil Foden has an excellent record, or certainly did up until a couple of years ago. Maybe has quietened down a little bit, but has done really, really well against Liverpool in the past as well. I mean, there's similar to Liverpool, really, there's enough players there that you think, okay, they're not playing maybe at their best, but you're only ever 45-minute confidence boost away from suddenly that clicking into place and looking a lot better. So who else is there, do you think, to keep an eye on from Manchester City?
Well, I mean, one thing I would say is I think City will rotate more in between their midweek Champions League game than Liverpool. Maybe you would say that because Liverpool have an extra day's rest, will that matter? Will they almost cancel each other out a little bit? But I think City will. They don't have many injuries at the moment, so they'll rotate a little bit more. I think that probably after Haaland, City's best player this season has been Jeremy Doku on the left wing, so that could be a fantastic battle, him against Conor Bradley. I remember him giving Trent Alexander-Arnold a couple of difficult games, Doku as well. So that could be one interesting battle. And I think on the flip side, at left City have left back been a huge issue for a number of years with City. They haven't really had a left back. I know they signed Aidan Nuri this summer, but he's coming back from injury. Nico O'Reilly's played there a lot in the last couple of weeks. Him against Salah could be, Liverpool could really have some joy, because I think O'Reilly's a nice player, but he is really a midfielder playing a fullback as Pep likes to do. So, yeah, it will be an interesting battle. And you mentioned Phil Foden. I think that he's certainly not the levels he was 2 years ago, but he is looking back to his best. I watched the game against Bournemouth, and he was involved in every single goal in some part, but certainly one of the goals, it was for O'Reilly, actually. He played a lovely pass, and he's looking really, really good at the moment, Phil Foden. So it'll be a difficult game from Liverpool. I think if you offer Liverpool a point now, they probably would take it. It's going to be a difficult, the struggle going to the Etihad over the last couple of years. Last year was the exception, obviously, but yeah, I think it'll be a really good game anyway.
Yeah, it's going to be fascinating, isn't it? I think it's safe to say that Arsenal are in the driving seat at the moment for the Premier League title. They're the ones that are at the top, but I mean, City and Liverpool, I think I wouldn't rule either of them out of being, proper, genuine challengers all the way. Whether one of them can catch up and overtake, I'm not too sure. But, it's set up quite nicely, isn't it, this game, from an Arsenal perspective, for them to think, well, at least one of these teams are both going to drop points. So, it's a nice position for them to be in as well. Do you expect City to be as close a title challenger to Arsenal as Liverpool were? Where do you kind of view where they're up to this season?
That's going to be the narrative around Sunday's game, isn't it? Who is going to be the closest challenger to Arsenal? You can already see that kind of forming now. I think that City have a really high ceiling still, and when they're on it and playing well, they've looked really, really good this season. I think the issue at times has come that they just had too many off days, or too many days where they haven't really been firing on all cylinders. There was that Brighton game at the start of the season; they were poor. Lost them against Villa a couple of weeks ago, and they weren't awful, but they certainly weren't good. So I think that's the question, really. Can they, how many blips and how many, slip ups are they going to have, which obviously wasn't there a few years ago. Right now, I think Liverpool probably will be the closest challenger to Arsenal, above City. But I think both will be in and amongst there. I think the question is more: are Arsenal going to slip up to let either side in? Really, I think that's the big question at the moment. And the way they're playing, it does look very ominous, I have to say, from a Liverpool perspective. I know Liverpool fans don't want to hear that, but a team that just don't concede goals it's a really, really dangerous proposition. So, but in saying that, do wonder this weekend, you look at Sunderland, that could be, I wonder if there's a little bit of a banana skin in that one, but I think Liverpool fans will certainly hope so.
Yeah, it would certainly set up that game on Sunday nicely, wouldn't it? If Sunderland could do something, that would only increase that narrative of who's going to be the closest challenger to Arsenal for sure. But just to finish then, I mean, you mentioned there that the game that Liverpool won at the Etihad last season, a game actually where Liverpool did play a little bit more defensively, changed the formation, changed the way that they played, went a little bit more solid and got the 2 goals and basically just sat on that lead. It's going to be fascinating, I think, to see how both teams set up. Liverpool stability and just sort of going again with pretty much the same team is probably the choice that you'd go for. But they do have that template from last season as well. They've got plenty of options. Curtis Jones, I think, is one that I would be tempted by in terms of his ability to put his foot on the ball and keep hold of it. Where you fit him in is probably quite hard in terms of who you take out of that team. But team selection from both teams, I think, is going to be interesting for this one. Are Are you expecting something similar to the Real Madrid game and Liverpool to go again with something similar, do you think, for this one? Or might Arne Slot be tempted to look back to last season and think, maybe let's have a go with that?
Possibly. Remember last season? Did they almost play like a midfield diamond and then two wingers? Yeah. It'd be interesting. Because actually, Florian Wirtz would suit that, wouldn't he? Really? Always playing that. Yeah, that tip of the...
Dominic Szoboszlai was exceptional in that game as well. Another one where you kind of... I think always somewhere on the pitch when you're playing these big games, you've got somebody is going to have to do two jobs in one, and he's an obvious one that can do the running of, well, two, to put it mildly, maybe 3 or 4.
Yeah, no, you're right. No, it'll be interesting. I mean, my instinct says I think you'll stick with a team that has played well over the last 2 games. Perhaps bring Gakpo in for Wirtz on the left wing. He seems to prefer Wirtz in Champions League games at the moment than Premier League games, but it is an interesting point. And I suppose you do maybe look at this City and wonder, well, is it the same City as last season? It probably is still more or less, you would say. But yeah, it's an interesting one. I think from a City perspective, I wonder whether they'll put Vardiol at left back and bring another centre back in, just coming back to the point I was making about Salah up against Nico O'Reilly. But yeah, be an interesting one. What do you think? How do you think they'll set up Liverpool?
My guess, my gut would be that they'd go similar to Real Madrid just because it worked so well, and I would like to see Florian Wirtz. Obviously, he didn't start against Villa. My thinking with that was that that's probably going to mean he starts the 2 after that, which, if you're going to keep him in there, I guess that's probably the best way of doing it. You could sort of go 2, maybe have Wirtz and Ekitike, but then you lose one of your midfield slots because assuming you've got Gakpo and Salah wide, then you'd have to take somebody out of that midfield. I can't quite get that to work in terms of the personnel, but yeah, it will be interesting, I think, in terms of Liverpool. It'll be interesting as well if they really do go for it, if it's, draw on 60 minutes, which team is the most likely to go, actually, we really want to go ahead and win that game, or whether both teams would just be happy to go, let's not lose it. I'm not quite sure where Liverpool would land on that, and Manchester City as well. Obviously, they'll be the home team, and the emphasis will be on them to a certain extent to do that. But yeah, a draw would be my score prediction. I think let's finish with a score prediction. I know it's hard to say this far ahead. City have still got another game to play as we record this before the weekend, but I think I'm going to go for a draw. That feels like a nice enough result for both teams, and probably the biggest winner there would be Arsenal. But yeah, what do you reckon?
Yeah, I think a draw. A score draw. I think both teams will score.
Both teams will score, yeah.
Yeah. I know you said that was the last thing we're going to do. Can I just take you back to what you're saying? So if you had to start the team that started against Villa or the team that started against Real Madrid, so Gakpo or Wirtz, what would you do?
I would go with Wirtz for 2 reasons. One, I don't think Gakpo has been particularly good the last few weeks. I know you could probably say that across a number of positions, and things can change quickly, but I just think Florian Wirtz is so good that you've just got to play him into some sort of form, and it looked nicely balanced against Real Madrid. Now, maybe that was just the one-off, and it won't look quite so good moving forwards, but as long as that midfield three stays the same and Florian Wirtz can float a little bit, I'm happy with that for now. Obviously, it becomes a lot more complicated when Isak is back fit. I suspect after the international break, he'll be back, and then that complicates things again because Ekitike has to be in that team as well. But yeah, for me, it would definitely be Florian Wirtz on that side. For those reasons, really, just he's the one who has made the biggest impression most recently. It's a little bit of recency bias, but I do think you've just got to build a little bit of confidence into him.
See, I go Gakpo, but I can understand your logic, but I would go Gakpo. But yeah, it's an interesting one. I actually think that could be one of his big choices heading into this game because, as you said, 5 days in between the two, between Madrid and City, they should be able to pick whatever team he wants. Really, there shouldn't be any issues with rest. So yeah, it's fascinating. It's really interesting debate. Actually, I think lots of people will be having it in the coming days.
Yeah, that's probably the only selection dilemma. I think the rest of the team pretty much will pick itself, really. The fitness and injuries and things like that aside, maybe we'll see Alexander Isak come off the bench potentially. I know he's obviously been named in the Sweden squad, which suggests that they're hoping that he's going to be fit and available. So I don't think he's obviously going to start, but maybe as an option off the bench. But yeah, it's a fascinating game. I'm sure we'll be talking about that Manchester City game next week, not least because it's the international break, so there wasn't much else to talk about. But yes, we'll be back, I'm sure, hopefully after another positive win for Liverpool against Manchester City on Sunday. But yeah, for now, thank you very much, Michael, for joining me, for you guys at home as well for watching and listening. And we'll be back, as I say, next week with the next Liverpool.com podcast.
This is the Blood Red podcast from the Liverpool Echo, giving you the inside track on all the big talking points from Anfield.